we just want to open it up. I have plenty of questions for the panelists, but I thought, and they would prefer, I think, to try to open it up for questions from the audience, I'd imagine. Does anyone want to start? You're going to let me start. Okay, everyone's going to be shy. That's all right. Okay, I'll get the ball rolling. Feel free to jump in. One thing we touched on, but Jamie, I know you and I were talking about the BP effect. It's early in the game here. BP was very active. They pulled back a little bit. But can you provide any perspective in terms of companies that you're talking to or you've talked to, and how you
in terms of the spill?
The spill, and any, were they going to use this as a public affairs opportunity to, or what's your take?
I think from BP's standpoint, I imagine that they'll probably stay the course in terms of what their investments may or may not have been in the clean tech space. I would imagine, I would be surprised if they try to make a big show of it. It'll look incredibly disingenuous to talk about how clean they are when they're really destroying an ecosystem down there, or at least their oil is. But I think that spill is really, and we're starting to see it, and we're starting, we've done some kind of gaming around it and looking at it. But this spill is, which is still ongoing and is likely to continue for probably several months, is going to have a huge effect on not just the oil and gas industry, but the energy industry in total. And I'm not talking just here in the United States, but I'm talking globally. Where BP was drilling, which is in the deep water, that's where the most of the oil is still available for such companies is contained, both within the Gulf and within several countries around the world. And other countries around the world are closely examining what our response is going to be towards this disaster in terms of what it means for our oil and gas industry. I think it highlights something that we identified actually before this occurred, and actually just before the recession, which is we're moving globally into an increased regulatory environment. Not just in the U.S., but in several other countries, there was a tendency to have less regulation over the last couple of decades. And we're now going to start moving in the other direction. We've already started that with the recession, but that's going to continue. And I won't get into whether I think it's a good thing or a bad thing for business. It's going to happen. And so if you're a company of a substantial size, I suggest that you polish off your legislative affairs and be aware of what's going on, because, and not just on a tactical basis, but on a strategic basis of what is going to be driving things going forward. But I think in terms of the stages of this spill, we've already begun to see it, which is one sort of a crisis sort of thing. And while it's still a crisis, it's this long crisis that people are not quite so, day by day sort of thing, but still very focused on it. The next phase we've already started to move into, which is the laying of blame, which you see, President Obama, you see the Republicans, you see the Democrats, you see Sarah Palin. Everybody is laying blame. The next phase, which a lot of people won't necessarily see right now, but the next phase is actually going to be saving the industry. And that is looking at it and recognizing that oil and gas is still vitally important for the U.S. And for the globe, and that this is an important place for us to get our oil and gas going forward. And so it's a question of, do we want to get this oil from U.S. waters, or would we like to export the environmental risk and import the oil, which is what we're doing with Nigeria and others. Nigeria has spills of a similar size pretty much yearly, and you just don't hear about it. It's Nigeria. So I think it's really going to have a major effect. And so in terms of what that's going to do in the U.S., it's going to have a big push in terms of a benefit to natural gas. But natural gas is also suffering from concerns about regulatory factors, such as right now the natural gas boom is ongoing essentially because of a loophole in the Safe Water Drinking Act that allows fracturing of the reservoirs with some fluids that are given a waiver by EPA. So there's a drive to try to remove this waiver. And what that will do is, for better or for worse, will affect the pace of development for natural gas. So at a time when people could really be moving and saying, let's move towards a more clean fuel, for our cars or whatever in terms of electricity, aka natural gas, you're seeing an increased potential regulatory risk there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, Steve, you want
I
to?
just wanted to build on that. The first point, just from today's news, we are quickly going into the blame phase of this. John Podesta's organization just put out a report that was called Cheney's Katrina, which is now the news cycle of the day. So we're clearly in that particular phase. But I had a lot of colleagues and friends to ask me.
I'm sorry, can I stop you? But John Podesta, when he put this out, did he put it out under his CAP?
Yeah.
Or did he put it out under? Because John Podesta is actually, he doesn't necessarily, but those of us in the Beltware, he's deep in the pocket of natural gas. I mean, that's where his focus is right now.
What's the organization?
Clean Skies.
Thank you, Center for American Progress. They issued it today.
Okay.
Thank you. I can't see who said that, but since the spill has happened, I had a lot of folks saying, "Oh, that must be great for your industry. You're doing a lot of offshore wind development, et cetera, et cetera." And we don't like to dance on the grave of our. We think we need a very balanced portfolio, and of course, power generation and fuel generation are two separate lines of energy needs. But I actually look at this as a negative, how it's going to impact that particular aspect of renewable energy, and the fact that, as you said, we're going to go into this over-regulation and restructuring of the regulatory environment, starting at MMS, which is shouldering a large portion of the blame here, and MMS at the Mineral Management Service, which handles all the offshore drilling, leasing, and offshore leasing of land, seabed. Was also doing the offshore wind issues as well, and they were just in the beginning stages of sort of streamlining and really working with industry to figure out to go from, they said it was a 9-year leasing process, trying to get down to a 3 to 4 year leasing process. And I fear that this will sidetrack them greatly. It'll have to, and it will impact the ability of what was already a slow developing, sort of really coming online in the 2014 to 2016 timeframe in terms of federal waters projects for offshore wind, and may push that out even further due to the fact that this particular catastrophe, which, make no doubt about it, it's a major environmental catastrophe, will impact their ability to focus on the renewable energy side of the house, which is leasing land for offshore wind development. So I think it's going to have a negative impact even over in our little side of the world.
Okay. Try one more time. Anybody out there? If not, I've got. Yep, down here, please. If you couldn't hear, the question was for Jordan about the gasification project.
Exactly. So a little bit on the timeline. We're currently in the middle of the permitting process. So we've submitted a AFC, which is an application for consideration to the California Energy Commission to start construction of a 250 net megawatt power plant in Kern County, about 2 hours north of Los Angeles, in late 2011, early 2012. It will take 3 years to build, and we're hoping to have early operations in 2015. Conditional upon getting the permits required to build the plant and the commercial agreements to deliver the power to the 3 major California public utilities. So that's the timeline we're working on. And some of the obstacles, I'd say, is an education component with regulators, and also commercially with certain aspects of the utilities and local government, is understanding that the power sector needs base load, reliable electricity that's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and renewables can complement base load power and provide supplemental near zero greenhouse gas emission electricity. But as it was mentioned, when it's not windy and not sunny, you still need a zero carbon supply of baseload electricity. And so right now, today, there's only 2 options for that. One is nuclear, and the other is carbon capture storage on fossil fuel power plants. And so California currently has an implicit moratorium on storing nuclear waste, but I won't speak to that because I'm not an expert on nuclear, but I'll let you pick up on that. But the only other option, in terms of large scale, would be carbon capture storage, and some people could argue certain forms of hydro. So if California is going to set and stick to the very aggressive targets of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 to 1990 levels, the entire power sector of the state will need to drastically reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that it currently generates. A lot of that will come from the baseload component of that power, which is really the foundation of the current portfolio. And we like to see this technology as one of the solutions and the way forwards to meeting the regulatory targets and using existing technology to do that. Because one of the interesting things about our project is every piece is existing technology. We're putting it together. So the concept of gasifying fossil fuels has existed for decades. The technology to split a gas into its trace elements has existed. The turbine we're using is a General Electric natural gas turbine that's been retrofitted to be able to take hydrogen. And then the enhanced oil recovery with carbon dioxide, which is the offtake of the project, is also a process that's been around for about a generation. So all these components exist in isolation. What we're doing is bringing them all together for an innovative project that provides a new kind of arrow in the quiver of California's battle to decarbonize its power generation.